This week, I'm going to lead you through a practice focusing on stretching and releasing tension around the legs, feet, and hip area. You could use this after a workout or maybe at the end of a long day on your feet. Let's get started. A couple of props that would be very helpful for this practice would be a bolster or some kind of a pillow, or you could roll a blanket to be your bolster, and then a strap, or you could use a towel or any kind of a belt as a yoga strap. So those two props would be very helpful. And then we're going to start from lying down on the back. And we're going to spend most of the practice on the back today. Just have your props somewhere nearby where it's easy to reach for them when needed. And then bring yourself into any easy pose where you could take just a few breaths. Maybe extend the legs, or you could also have your legs bent. Just a few breaths to check in how you feel. Allow your head to become heavy. Allow your shoulders to relax, and just take a few breaths to notice where in the legs, feet, maybe around the hips, you would like to focus on today. And then let that inform your practice. You can always make some small adjustments in the pose to target those areas that you need to focus on today. And then slowly, with your next few breaths, bend your knees if you have your legs extended. And give yourself a few windshield wipers here. You could open arms out to the sides as well. Just notice how you feel in the thighs. Do they feel tense? What about in the buttocks? Is there tension on the back side of the pelvis? Is there any achiness in your knees that you need to be aware of? And do a couple more gentle swings. And then with your next couple of breaths, bring your legs together and then bring both legs onto the left side of the mat into a full reclining twist. And you could have your knees, your feet on top of each other. But if that creates any pain in the back or in the hips, then let yourself adjust. You might bring one leg lower down than the other. Maybe you want to extend one leg more than the other. Looking for a twist where you can now access the right, the outer side of the right hip, coming into the outside of the right thigh. So if you need to, you might drop your right hip just a bit further back, as if the back of that right side of the pelvis is sinking down. So maybe the hips are not stacked on top of each other. So see where you could access that outer side of the right thigh, right hip. If you want, you could bring left hand onto the right thigh or knee. Right arm could be just resting either out on the side, or you could bring your right hand onto your belly. And then give yourself another 5 breaths here. As we go through the practice, you might feel sensations of stretching. But it might be that in some poses, the pose just helps you to release tension. So we're not necessarily looking for intense stretching sensations. Sometimes it's better to stay on a more gentle edge and just focus on softening, letting go of tension than pushing into a full-on stretch. But you know what's better for you today. So let yourself find your own way through the practice. And then after your 5 breaths, just slowly come back to center. So bring legs back up. And give yourself a couple more of those swings. So a little bit of movement before we do that full twist to the other side. And then slowly again bring your feet and knees closer together, and then bring them both to your right side. So again, finding that full twist, but then you might adjust. Do you then want to keep your feet, your knees on top of each other? Do they need to slide apart a bit? Do you want to open the left arm? And again, looking for a place where you could now access the outer side of your left hip, left thigh. Right hand could rest on your left knee or thigh if that helps. And again, you might play with the idea of the back side of the left side of your pelvis, kind of sinking down a bit. So making that pelvic area a bit asymmetrical, if that helps you to access the outer side of the left hip, left buttock, left thigh. Make sure there's no pain. So again, not pushing into a point where you're hurting in the joints, or not pushing into a point where the sensations are so intense that you can't relax. Checking in with the breath and just keeping the breath steady and calm. You could send your breaths to those places, those areas that you feel most. Take another couple of breaths here, in and out. And then slowly, slowly start to release the twist. Come back to center. Again, you might rock just a couple of times, rock the legs, the pelvis from side to side. And then we're going to stay on the left side. We're going to go into a version of the reclining deer, twisted deer. So we're trying to get a bit more into the left thigh, hip flexor area. You can now walk your feet a bit wider apart, wider than your pelvis. And then slowly bring your left knee in. So you're slightly internally rotating that left thigh and just letting the left thigh drop in. It's very possible that the knee does not touch the mat. That's not the intention, but we're trying to access the left thigh and hip flexor area. And that hip flexor area comes all the way up through the belly, maybe all the way up to the chest. Depending on where you might have tightness, you might feel it lower down, higher up. And you could keep your right knee up, so the right hip in a more kind of parallel orientation. Or you might let your right knee drop out to the right side, and that potentially changes the whole situation around the pelvis and where you feel the pose on the left-hand side. Again, make sure there's no pain in the knee joint. You might flex or point your left foot and ankle. And you might still adjust where the left foot is. Do you walk the left foot further out, further in? How could you access that hip flexor, that deep hip flexor line? Again, it starts from the chest, goes through the belly, hip, into the thigh, but you might feel it anywhere along that line. Make sure you keep breathing. Send your breaths all the way down to that belly area. We'll take a couple more breaths here. And if the time that I'm suggesting is too long, you can always come out earlier. But after those couple of breaths, if you feel it's been long enough, slowly, slowly come back to center. And then we'll do same to the other side. So again, keeping feet wider apart. Now we're going to bring the right knee, the right thigh in. So you start to rotate that right hip in so that your right knee comes slowly down, closer to the floor, but very likely not onto the floor. So it's just that internal rotation in the right hip and thigh. And then if you want, you might continue opening that left leg out to the side again. That probably changes the situation in the pelvic area. And it might give you more sensations, it might give you less sensations. You decide if you keep that left knee up or open it out to the side. Again, you might still adjust the right foot, the right ankle. Make sure there's no pain in the joints. And keep breathing. You can send a few more breaths down towards the belly, down towards the pelvis. And then with exhalations, just soften, release effort, release tension. And then slowly, slowly start to come back to center. And then let's do a couple of windshield wipers. The windshield wipers are quite nice movement in between longer poses. It just allows a bit of gentle movement. And sometimes the movement also helps us to really notice where we feel the pose. Now we're going to next go into thread the needle. And again, let's go to the left side first. Now we're going to externally rotate the left hip and we'll bring the legs into this figure 4 shape. So your left ankle or foot on the right thigh. And this might be plenty enough. You might start to feel this in the groin area, maybe in the left buttock, the left thigh. If you want to go a bit further, then lift your right foot off the mat and reach hands behind the right knee or thigh. And then gently you can start to hug the legs closer to your belly, closer to your chest. You might keep your right shin about parallel to the floor, or you might let your right knee completely relax so your right foot drops further down. You might even start to lift your right foot up towards the ceiling, so extending the right leg further. Look for a shape that gives you helpful, useful sensations around the left buttock, left thigh, maybe in the right leg as well. The back of the pelvis might roll off the mat. That's very fine. We'll take a couple more breaths here, in and out, wherever you are in your thread the needle or figure 4. The pose has a couple of different names. Keep shoulders soft. And then exhale, slowly, slowly release the legs. Bring both feet onto the mat. And then for a few breaths, extend your both legs down. You might also reach arms overhead along the floor, just going the opposite way. And then we'll go into that thread the needle on the other side. So now bend your both legs. And on this side, open the right hip. So rotate your right hip into that figure 4 shape, right ankle or foot on the left thigh. And again, this might be plenty enough. You might stay here with the left foot on the mat, or slowly lift the left foot off the mat and reach hands behind the left knee, behind the left thigh. And you might also play with the right ankle, right foot. Do you want to flex? Do you want to point that right ankle? That might change the sensations in the hip, in the knee. You might play with the angle in your left knee. You might even extend your left leg up towards the ceiling. And find that shape that suits you now, that helps you to release some tension around the right buttock, right thigh. A place where you can breathe, and you can send a couple more breaths all the way down towards the belly, all the way down towards the pelvis. And then slowly, slowly start to release the pose. Bring your both feet onto the mat. And again, extend your both legs. You could reach arms overhead. Take a bigger, deeper breath in and out. And then come back to having your feet on the mat. We're going to go into a supported bridge. So this is where the bolster or some kind of a cushion, pillow would be needed. So reach for your bolster or prop, and then elevate your pelvis off the mat so you can bring that support under the pelvis. So now our intention is to elevate the pelvis off the mat without needing to hold the pelvis up. So that's why we bring the support under the pelvis. And you could have your strap, your belt somewhere nearby as well. And now we're going to spend about a minute, 5 to 10 breaths in the supported bridge. You could either have your knees bent, or you might extend your legs, and that might give stronger, bigger sensations at the front of the hips. Again, that hip flexor area. And you might bring arms overhead. That might catch the kind of top part of the hip flexors more. You might play with having feet wider apart or closer together, whether you have your knees bent or legs extended. And we don't need to feel a big stretch here. It could be more of a release, also potential release in the hip flexor and pelvic floor area and combination. So having the pelvis elevated might help to release the pelvic area. Might help to release the pelvic floor. And you could send your breaths all the way down to that pelvic floor. Exhalation, softening tension. Let's take another breath here, in and out. And then with your next couple of breaths, if you have your legs extended, slowly bring your feet, your soles of the feet back onto the mat. And then for the next couple of poses, you'll have an option to keep the bolster under the pelvis. That's what I'm going to do. But you can also choose to push it aside. So as we go into the next few poses, you can keep the bolster or you can push it away at any point. Now, we're going to bring the right knee towards the chest and keep the left foot on the mat. We're going to reach for the belt, for the strap, and bring it around the right foot. So that with the help of the belt, with the help of the strap, we could now lift the right leg, the right foot up towards the ceiling, starting to look for some opening, a gentle stretch at the back of that right leg. And having the bolster under the pelvis might make things a bit easier, especially if you know that there is a lot of tension at the hamstring, maybe calf area. And you could stay here. This might be plenty enough. If you want to go a bit further, you could extend your left leg, and you can do this whether you have the bolster under the pelvis or you don't. And it might be that at this point you notice, I don't really like the bolster. You can still remove it, come back to the pose. Try to keep your shoulders, your arms as soft as possible. So I'm suggesting either lean your elbows onto the mat, or if you have a shorter belt or strap, then just extend your arms so you're holding the strap as close to your foot as possible. So you're just kind of hanging your arms from that belt, not pulling, not tensing the arms. Looking for that opening on the back side. You might feel this in the sole of the foot. That's where I feel this most at the moment. And you might flex and kind of straighten the ankle if that helps, or even roll the ankle a few times. Take a couple more breaths in and out here. And then slowly, with your next few breaths, bend the right knee to your chest. Keep the strap where it is. And then bring your left knee to your chest so that you could now bring left foot inside the strap or towel, belt, whatever you're using. And then release the right leg. So you bring your right foot onto the mat. Again, you can continue using a bolster or push the bolster aside and then extend your left leg up towards the ceiling. And you might need to adjust your props or where you hold the strap on this side. You can keep your right leg bent, or you might extend the right leg. And just find your shape on this second side. This might be a completely different case, completely different experience. And again, just notice where you feel the pose and then start to send your breaths to that part of the body. And again, if the foot ankle feel tight, you might move your left foot, maybe flexing, pointing the ankle, maybe circling the ankle. And especially if the sensations are really intense, adding some gentle movement might help to also kind of distract your mind away from those stronger sensations. It might give you a bit more time in the pose. Your neck, shoulders still soft. Let's take a few more breaths here, in and out. And then slowly, slowly, in your own time, start to bend the left knee. And then we're going to bring right foot on the mat. We're going to bring left foot on the mat. We'll put the belt, the strap aside. And then one more pose where you could keep bolster under the pelvis, reclining butterfly. But you might as well decide you want to push the bolster away, or maybe you'd rather bring the bolster under your knees, under your thighs. Now looking for a butterfly shape. So turning knees out to the sides like a diamond shape in your legs. You might have the soles of the feet together. I like to flex the ankles further so only my heels are touching and toes are turned out to the sides. After holding the belt, it might be nice to release the arms higher up, maybe over the head or out to the sides. And now targeting more the inner thighs. Maybe finding more release in the pelvic floor again. So send your breaths all the way down to the lower belly, down towards the pelvic floor. Give yourself another 5 breaths here, in and out. And then after your 5 breaths, or when you feel ready, slowly, slowly close your hips. Bring the soles of the feet back onto the mat. And then we're going to slide arms lower down so that we could now elevate the pelvis off the prop, the bolster. Push it aside and release the back. Release the pelvis down onto the mat. And if you want, you could now hug the knees in if you feel like rounding the back. Or you might just swing the legs a few times from side to side. Or take a moment in a brief resting pose. Give yourself a few breaths before we have a couple more poses, targeting the legs, targeting the back as well. And then next, we're going to go into cat pulling its tail. So it's a twist, but also we're going to target the outside and back side of the legs. And you could use your strap, your belt for this again, but it might be that you don't need it, but just have it somewhere close by. And first side, we're going to go back into that full reclining twist like we had in the beginning, but then we're going to extend the right leg, so the top leg out to the side, and either reach left hand to the right foot, or this is where you could bring your belt, your strap around that right foot, so you hold the strap with your left hand. And then open the right arm just out to the side. And it could be that you keep your left knee close to the right knee, or you could start to slowly slide your left thigh away from the right thigh. So you're kind of scissoring the legs further away from each other. And that might increase sensations in the right leg. It might be that it doesn't make a big difference. See what feels good for you. But trying to find that twist, and once more, maybe some sensations on the outside of the right leg, maybe back of the right leg. Just make sure, again, you're not hurting in the joint, so let yourself adjust. It is potentially an intense twist, an intense opening along that right leg. Give yourself another 5 breaths here. And then slowly, towards the end of those 5 breaths, take a bigger breath in and out. And then bend your right knee, release the strap, and slowly come back onto your back. And we'll do same to the other side. So now we're going to bring both legs to the right side of the mat. And then extend the left leg out to the side. Again, you could here reach your right hand to the left foot. Or you might use your strap. You could use your belt and hold the strap in your right hand. Bring the strap around the left foot. And then you might scissor your right thigh away from the left thigh. Maybe open left arm out to the side. So there are a lot of options for you to adjust this pose. And it might be that on the second side, the shape needs to be very different. And looking for sensations on the outside, maybe back side of that left leg, hip. You might feel the intense twist in the spine. Just make sure it's not painful. Head can turn to one side or the other if you want, or you could keep it in the center. Let your breath slide down and up along the spine. each out breath softening tension. Take a couple more breaths in and out. And you might adjust the arms as well. Maybe they need to be lower down on this side. And then slowly, slowly, with your next couple of breaths, release that twist, release the cat pulling its tail. Come back to center, maybe rock the legs, the pelvis a bit from side to side. And then we'll do a mini Shavasana pose here. Shavasana is not going to be our final pose today. We're just going to spend 5 to 10 breaths here before we come up to a seated pose. But just taking a moment to check in. How you feel now. How do your hips feel? Does one side feel different than the other? Does one side maybe feel heavier or more released or more open than the other? What about in the legs? Do you feel tension? Or do you feel nice and easy in the legs? How do you feel in the feet? You might even circle your feet, your ankles a couple of times. Do they feel tense? Or maybe you've released tension down in the feet. Just making observations for yourself. But don't judge yourself. There's no right or wrong way to feel. Take another breath or two here, in and out. And then slowly either roll yourself up into a seat, or you could turn to one side and bring yourself up into a seat through one side. And then we'll have one more full forward bend from here. Now you could use a strap in this forward bend or not, especially if you know that forward bends are a bit struggle. The belt might help to just ease you into that forward bend. So you could have your legs, your feet hip width apart. You might open them a bit wider. We're going to inhale, open the chest, and just gonna lift yourself up away from the mat through the spine. And then exhale, lean forward. You might hold a strap. You might find yourself just bringing hands around your feet or ankles as you lean forward. Or maybe have your hands on the mat, on the floor, next to your legs, next to your feet. Looking for a place where you find some opening along the back side of the body. Now you might feel this in the feet, and again you might play with flexing your feet or pointing your feet. You might feel this on the back side of your legs, maybe calves, maybe hamstrings, maybe buttocks. Breathe in and out. And as you let your back, your head sink forward, down, maybe you find sensations along your back as well, maybe in the neck. Maybe you are targeting the whole back line of your body, from feet all the way up to the neck, all the way up to the scalp. Send a few more breaths towards the back, like you're breathing into your turtle shell. Let the exhalation soften you down and forward. Not pulling too much, not pushing yourself. Just releasing tension, letting yourself sink into the pose. One more breath in and out. And then with your next inhalation, slowly start to walk yourself up with your hands, with your arms. Step hands behind the pelvis and then lean away from that forward bend. Just gently open the chest. You can breathe towards the chest, towards the belly. Maybe rock a bit from side to side. And then if you want to, you could once more bend the knees, do a few windshield wipers here. And then next we're going to find our final seat. Just that final pose where you could end your practice. If you want, you could find a cross-legged seat. You might sit on your knees. You might sit on your bolster if that feels good. Find a place where you could leave your hips soft, your back, your shoulders soft, and where you could give yourself just a few breaths at the end of the practice. Closing the practice here. If it's a part of your practice, you could bring palms together in front of the chest. And as always, at the end of the practice, most importantly, thank yourself for taking some time for yourself, for your practice today. And I thank you very much for joining in. And I do hope you found some ease and release in your legs, in the feet, and around the hips. Namaste. Thank you.